the executive terminal of Skybridge International. Airport was unusually busy on a rainy Monday morning. Luxury travelers hurried toward departure gates while airline staff prepared a fully booked international flight to London. Among the passengers stood Daniel Hayes, a quiet single father in his late 30s, wearing a Navy business suit and carrying only a black leather document folder containing a framed photo of his late mother and a single white lily. Daniel wasn't traveling for business. His mother had passed away 2 days earlier after a long illness, and this flight was his only chance to attend her funeral. His young daughter was staying with relatives, waiting for him to return after saying his final goodbye. As Daniel reached the VIP check-in counter, Claire Morgan, the airline's ambitious regional operations director, reviewed his reservation. Without looking up, she frowned. "Your seat has been reassigned to an important government delegation. Your ticket has been canceled," Daniel calmly explained that he had confirmed the booking weeks earlier and showed every required document. "Please," he said quietly. "My mother's funeral is tomorrow morning. If I miss this flight, I'll never get another chance to say goodbye." Claire barely glanced at the family photograph in his folder. "I'm sorry," she replied coldly, "but our VIP passengers come first." Around them, airline employees lowered their eyes in embarrassment while nearby. Travelers watched in silence. Daniel never argued or raised his voice. He simply looked once more at his mother's photograph, closed the folder, and softly said, "I understand." Then, he turned away from the counter and slowly walked toward the terminal exit. No one inside the airport recognized the quiet man they had just turned away. To the public, Daniel Hayes appeared to be an ordinary businessman and devoted single father, but hidden behind private investment companies and confidential ownership agreements, he was the anonymous majority owner of Aerovista Holdings, the aviation empire that owned the airline itself, along with airports, aircraft leasing companies, and maintenance facilities across 3 continents. Within 24 hours, the decision to cancel one grieving father's flight would change the future of the entire company. As Daniel quietly left the terminal, several airline employees exchanged uneasy glances. One gate supervisor whispered, "We could have found another seat," but Claire Morgan dismissed the concern. "Government officials bring more value than one passenger," she replied confidently before returning to her meetings. That evening, Daniel sat alone in a small airport lounge, staring at the framed photograph of his mother. He wasn't angry, only heartbroken that he would miss her final farewell. Meanwhile, across the city, Aerovista Holdings Global Headquarters prepared for its quarterly board meeting. Senior executives from around the world gathered to review customer satisfaction reports, financial performance, and leadership evaluations. At the end of the agenda, one confidential item remained labeled only Major Ownership Announcement. The following morning, Claire proudly arrived at headquarters, expecting recognition for successfully accommodating the government delegation. Instead, she noticed an unusual silence throughout the executive floor. Directors, legal advisors, and board members stood respectfully as the boardroom doors opened. Daniel Hayes walked into the room wearing the same Navy suit, carrying the same black leather folder that held his mother's photograph and white lily. Every board member immediately stood to greet him. Claire stared in disbelief. The chairman cleared his throat and spoke quietly. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce the majority owner and chairman of Aerovista Holdings, Mr. Daniel Hayes." The room became completely silent. Claire's face turned pale as she realized the grieving single father whose flight she had canceled wasn't just another passenger. He was the man who owned the airline and the person whose values had shaped the company from the very beginning. As Daniel slowly placed his mother's photograph on the conference table, he looked around the room and said calmly, "Today isn't about my position. It's about the kind of company we've become. When a son is denied the chance to bury his own mother." The boardroom remained silent as Daniel Hayes stood beside the conference table. No one dared speak. Claire Morgan lowered her eyes, unable to believe that the quiet single father she had dismissed at the airport was the majority owner of Aerovista Holdings. Daniel gently placed the white lily beside his mother's framed photograph before addressing the room. "My mother taught me one lesson," he said calmly. "A company's true character is revealed by how it treats people on the worst day of their lives. He wasn't angry. He wasn't seeking revenge. He simply asked the legal team to play the airport security footage from the previous morning. The large screen showed Daniel politely explaining that he was traveling to his mother's funeral. It showed Claire refusing to listen, despite employees suggesting other available solutions. Several directors lowered their heads in disappointment as the video ended. Daniel then surprised everyone. "I'm not here to fire anyone today," he said. "I'm here to fix a culture that allowed compassion to disappear." He announced a new company-wide policy called the Family Emergency Priority Program. From that day forward, passengers traveling because of the death or critical illness of an immediate family member would receive emergency assistance, flexible rebooking, and executive review before any cancellation could be approved. Every airport manager across the airline network would receive mandatory compassion and customer care training. Turning toward Claire, Daniel spoke quietly. "You made a business decision, but you forgot that behind every ticket is a human story." Claire stood with tears in her eyes. "I'm truly sorry," she whispered. "I thought I was protecting the company's interests." Daniel nodded gently. "The company's greatest interest has always been its people." At that moment, everyone in the room understood that the airline's future would no longer be measured only by profits or schedules, but by the humanity it showed every passenger who walked through its doors. A week later, Aerovista Holdings held a company-wide town hall that was broadcast live to every airport, office, and maintenance center across its global network. Thousands of employees watched as Daniel Hayes walked onto the stage carrying the same framed photograph of his mother. The room became completely silent. "My mother never cared how successful I became," Daniel began. "She only asked me to build a company that treated people with dignity. Last week, we failed that promise. I couldn't attend her funeral because one employee believed a passenger was just another reservation number. Today, we begin making sure that never happens again." Daniel then announced the launch of the Grace Journey Initiative, a permanent program providing emergency travel assistance for passengers facing family tragedies, special customer care teams, compassionate travel coordinators, and flexible emergency seating policies would now be available at every Aerovista airport worldwide. The announcement received a standing ovation from employees across the company. After the event, Claire Morgan privately asked to meet Daniel. Holding back tears, she apologized once more. "I can't change what happened," she said quietly. "But if you'll allow me, I'd like to help build the program you created." Daniel looked at her for a moment before nodding. "Real leadership isn't about never making mistakes," he replied. "It's about learning from them and making sure others never repeat them." Over the following months, Claire became one of the strongest advocates for compassionate customer service. Employees who once focused only on rules learned to listen to passengers. Stories first. The airline's reputation improved dramatically, not because it owned the most aircraft or flew the most routes, but because people knew Aerovista cared about them when they needed it most. One evening, Daniel visited his mother's grave with his young daughter. They placed fresh white lilies beside the headstone as the sun began to set. His daughter looked up and asked softly, "Grandma would be proud, wouldn't she?" Daniel smiled gently. "I hope so," he replied, "because her greatest gift wasn't the company. She inspired me to build. It was teaching me that kindness is always the best first-class service." As they walked away together, Daniel realized that although he had missed his mother's funeral, her final lesson would live on in every flight, every airport, and every life touched by a little more compassion.